Hey y'all, it's K-Bird Tweets, and this is Peace, Love, and Baseball. Hello and welcome to an all-new episode of Peace, Love, and Baseball. I am your host, Kelsey, aka K-Bird Tweets, at KBURD Tweets is where you can find me on the Twitter. But I'm so glad you're here, whether it is your first time checking us out or you've been with us week after week every Tuesday when we roll out new episodes. Welcome in. I am glad that you are here. And this week, we are rolling it back to good old classic This Week in Peace, Love, and Baseball. It's going to be that kind of episode. So we've got a segment that features peace, a segment that features love, and even though all of them will feature baseball, we'll wrap it up with a baseball heavy feature, which this week is going to be dedicated to Women in Baseball Week. So we'll get to all that good stuff. But let's start with peace. In our peace segment, sometimes we will focus on like health and wellness. I have years of experience in the fitness industry, as some might refer to it, kind of playing around with redefining what that means and people who are exposed to it, how it makes you feel, or maybe more of the mental and emotional side of wellness or, just humanity, human things. And I guess that's kind of where we're going with it this week. Let's talk about perception, folks. And let's start with how perception plays into our fandom, like our sports fandom, and how we relate to fans of other teams. So before we dive into it, kind of from that angle, I want to read you the definition of perception. A few different definitions here, but it is a noun. Perception is the ability to see, hear, or become aware of something through the senses. The state of being or process of becoming aware of something through the senses. Another definition would be a way of regarding, understanding, or interpreting something, a mental impression. So there's a lot of different things that play into our perception of things, and sometimes things that go further back than we may have ever realized. I mean, really everything. You could get really existential and deep with it. But let's start here in like our baseball fandom, because as you might know, I recently moved from the Midwest to New Jersey, and I'm actually very close to Philadelphia. Everyone around me is diehard Philadelphia Phillies fans. It's very, very serious, very involved baseball fandom here. I actually didn't mention this on last week's episode, but I went to my first Phillies game at Citizens Bank Park a couple weeks ago. And the biggest difference that I noticed at that game versus like any other stadium that I've been to a game at, and I'm not throwing shade at anyone in particular here, it's just truly an observation, is that we were like way up high in the, cheap seats in the stadium, and every single person around us, like everyone, all walks of life, all ages, all genders, all were in on it. Every pitch, like they were not just there to take in the atmosphere of the game, they were there to watch the freaking game and like be serious baseball fans. And that was really cool. Now they were playing the Dodgers, so I'm sure that was kind of like a heightened sense of excitement, but in general, the vibe that I am getting being surrounded by all these Phillies fans and being this close to the stadium itself is the fandom is very strong, and the Phillies sports fans are very serious. And that probably doesn't surprise you if you know anyone who is a Phillies fan or a Philadelphia sports fan, or you've heard, about the nature of the fandom here. But yeah, the vibe of kind of the area that I'm in, like the neighborhood, kind of ebbs and flows. The energy in the air ebbs and flows with how the sports teams are doing, because everyone is at least like surface level involved in it, which again is really cool. But I think that's a good like kind of disclaimer to what we're going to get into here. So the Phillies lost 2 of 3 games to the Oakland A's, who are one of the worst teams in baseball, before the All-Star break, and they just lost 2 of 3 to the Pittsburgh Pirates, which there's not like so much of a rivalry there because they're not in the same division, right? But there's also not been a time for quite a while where like both teams have been competitive at the same time. So even though they're both in Pennsylvania, I would say the Braves and the Phillies are much more of like a rivalry right now. So it wasn't necessarily the rivalry that like got people, I think, so shook up about them losing 2 of 3 to Pirates, but the Pirates are not one of the better teams in baseball. Like I think they're sitting right at 500-ish right now, trying to stay in the wild card race. But Phillies fans very much expect the Phillies to take the series from a team like the Pittsburgh Pirates. So when they lost 2 of 3 in the first 3 games after the break, now, mind you, they still have the best record in baseball and are by all means, in my humble opinion, and a very, educated kind of based on facts opinion, they are the best team in baseball. But Philly sports radio, y'all, Philly sports radio is losing its mind over many aspects actually of the Phillies, but the one I wanted to share with you today that I have heard them talking about now numerous times is how the Phillies need an all new pitching staff. Now, if you're a baseball fan, I don't care which team you're a fan of, like you probably know that the Phillies, they have some pretty good pitching. They have Zach Wheeler, they have Aaron Nola, they have Ranger Suarez, they have Christopher Sanchez. They have Taijuan Walker, who's on the injured list right now, but they also have this new kid from South Jersey, shout out Tyler Phillips, who has come up and handled himself really well. Let's not even talk about their bullpen. I mean, they had Jeff Hoffman, who's kind of like their closer, one of their closer by committee guys, and Matt Strom in the All-Star game. Like they had the most All-Stars of any team. Like they're a very good team. And again, like half of their All-Stars were pitchers. So the fact that, yeah, I've just heard multiple people on Philly sports radio being like, we just need to ship them out. Like the Phillies post game after the first loss to the Pirates, like on NBC Sports Philadelphia, listen, it was versus Aaron Nola, and it was brutal. Like they lost a not super well played game, but what was even more brutal was the commentators and the analysts on the post game. They were so mad. My husband actually looked at me and said, like, that guy looks like he needs to go have it out with a punching bag right now. Like he is so pissed about this loss. Meanwhile, you've got, Chip Carey and Brad Thompson and Jim the Cat Hayes and Alexa, smiley, bubbly, beautiful Alexa on the Cardinals network on Bally Sports Midwest, who are like having a grand old time regardless of the score, being, objective, but always thinking that there's a chance for the Cardinals to come back. And while I know that there's still the hardcore negative Nancy's of any fan base out there, the Cardinals are certainly not immune to that. As you know, if you've spent one day on baseball Twitter or even an hour. But like overall, the temperature of the fan base is that this team has a real chance, and not just to make the playoffs, but maybe even win the division. That is all based on perception, right? Because basically what I'm saying here is we have this team, the Phillies. They have the best record in baseball. They have 10 more wins, I believe, right now than the Cardinals. And this fan base and the media covering them are like spiraling, like because their last 6 games haven't been their best baseball, that it's like over for them. And meanwhile, the Cardinals are like barely keeping head above water, above 500. But because it's so much better than last year, we're like, all right, hell yeah, we've got a chance. Let's do this. So the Phillies fans are coming from a place where they had a really great team for the past 2 years and fell short. They are living in fear and almost like assumption at this point that that's what's going to happen again. And the whole regular season is just leading up to that. So it like kind of doesn't matter how well they play. There's that sense of imminent dread of them falling short in the postseason, and their perception of like every single game and every single series is, would that level of play hold up in the postseason? Cardinals fans are coming from a place where they had a most tragically awful season last year, that this season seems way better, even if it's not great. Cardinals fans are also used to teams that aren't on paper the best, but somehow tend to outplay expectations and get creative, crafty, maybe even a little devil magic-y, if you will, to make it happen. So we expect that the team, the Cardinals, will figure out a way to continue to be competitive with the hope that they've given us thus far. The Cardinals fans are playing to get into the playoffs. The Phillies fans are like World Series winners. Like, let's do it this time for real or bust. But because of all of this, in general, the fans and the media in Philly are being so much more critical of the best team in baseball than the Cardinals media and the fans are of a team that is honestly maybe quite possibly getting a little lucky at times and definitely has to continue to step it up if they are actually going to get into the playoffs, let alone be competitive in the playoffs. It's all perception. All the while, I got to mention this because I'm obviously very dialed into the Cardinals fan base, and now being where I am, getting more and more dialed in and meeting more and more Phillies fans. So these are like the two kind of angles, the perceptions that I have that I can speak to. But I need you to know that all the while, many Yankees fans are suggesting that the team should be sellers at this upcoming deadline. The trade deadline is coming up here in Major League Baseball in the next couple of weeks. And to be sellers at the deadline would mean that your team is not competitive enough to likely even make it into the playoffs. Certainly not to, you know, go further in the playoffs. So there's not a great chance you're going to get into the playoffs. That's why you would sell off and kind of reset and focus the rest of the season on being more competitive for next season, more or less. But so the Yankees are currently one of only 3 teams in baseball that have 60 or more wins. So they're up there with the Phillies as one of the best teams in baseball right now. But because they have now fallen a game and a half back from the Baltimore Orioles, I guess a lot of their fans think that they might as well call it quits. And I'm not saying this about all Yankees fans because I know a lot of great Yankees fans that again have a different perception, but this is from fans whose perception lies only within Yankees baseball and they lack any outside perspective of the way that like the Yankees can operate and have at times dominated the sport. They just have completely unrealistic and outlandish expectations that lack perspective. But it's their perspective, and maybe that's the kind of baseball that they want to be a fan of because of their perspective, and they're completely entitled to want that and think that one of the current best teams in baseball should burn it all down. But my point here is that it's interesting to take a second and think about why people perceive things the way that they do, right? Like Yankees fans have a very kind of unrealistic expectation in terms of the rest of us as baseball fans are looking at, but there's a reason why they have that expectation and why that is their perception. I wanted to take a look at this from a different angle because, of course, shall we? In a way that, like, if you're not even a sports fan, there's so many ways that perception affects the way that we think about things. So my question for you now is, what is an acceptable commute time to work? Is 30 minutes too far to drive? Is an hour too far to drive? Or would you go up to an hour and a half for the right thing under the right circumstances? How far do you drive for work? Maybe you drive 30 minutes and anywhere between like a 20 to 45-minute commute seems reasonable. Everyone commutes at least 20 minutes to get to work, right? Like that's your perception. But maybe you drive 10 minutes and you can't imagine having to drive further than 20 minutes. Like a full 30-minute commute would like surely make you look for another job. I mean, there's all sorts of reasons why that might be your perception of what a reasonable commute to work is rather than it being, 30 minutes or longer. But maybe you drive over an hour because maybe you live in a big city and that's just how traffic is. Or maybe you got an opportunity that you couldn't pass up that's worth the longer commute, but you can't move closer for other reasons, whether it be like your spouse's job, kids in school, all sorts of things. It all depends on your perspective and your perception of what you think an average or acceptable commute would be. And that is based on not just like your current circumstances, but also your life experience. Your opinion on such a simple thing as like how long a work commute should be or what is acceptable to you in terms of that. It all started way back before you even realized that you were observing and forming opinions on things. For example, my dad drove about 40 minutes or so to and from work each day when I was growing up. He had the same job the whole time I was growing up. That's just what he did. And that never seemed like an out of the ordinary thing for me. But I was talking to one of my new neighbors a week or so ago, and they drive 5 to 10 minutes up the street to work every day. And their daughter, her office had just opened a new location that was like 20 to 30 minutes away instead of 10 minutes away from her house. And she was freaking out and was really upset about the length of the commute. And it made her, to the extent that it made her reevaluate keeping her job. And in fact, everyone at her work was so upset by this, they actually ended up keeping the original office open so that people could drive 10 minutes instead of 30 minutes to work, because that's how much of a deal breaker it was for these people. Like their perception of a half-hour commute to work was unacceptable. This logic can be applied to literally anything. But I had to bring that up because I was hearing this and I was like, wow, I mean, that seems crazy that you wouldn't be willing to drive a half hour to work. Like, but I grew up in a small town where, like, to do anything, you had to drive about a half hour. And then I've lived in major cities most of my adult life where, again, like to get even a few miles, it's going to take you a half hour, whether you're, taking the train or driving or biking or whatever. Like, that's just kind of standard. So that's my perception. But in this area, I've now talked to multiple people who are like, well, there's everything I need is really within a 15-minute radius. So having to drive further than that is a pain. And that's just the perception based on many, many layers of life experience. But like the amount of money you think is appropriate to spend on just about anything and everything is affected by your perception of what it is worth to you. There are people that spend hundreds of dollars more a month to drive like a really nice car than I drive. And to them, like, that's worth it, while I can't possibly fathom why they would think that that is worth it. But I personally, I spend money every month on getting my nails done and using the fancy shampoo that I like. And that many people would also say the same thing. Like, well, I don't understand why it's worth it to you to spend that amount of money or time or attention to those things. The point is, it's up to us. We get to decide how and what we value based on our personal experience and our perception. So this applies to much larger issues outside of the length of a commute, which the length of a commute affects a lot of things in your life, and it affects other people in your life too, right? So it kind of is a big thing. It's like how long you're away from home, what kind of car you need to drive, how much money you need to spend on all of those things. But the point is, you get to decide based on your perception of what is right for you. So anyway, what is the point of us talking about this? The point I want to make is, next time that someone has a completely different opinion on something that you do, whether it is something as simple as, how long you should drive for work, or something that is like more of a sensitive or touchy subject, why not ask, how did you come to feel that way? Or what makes you feel that way? And I know with many issues that we are hearing politicians scream at us about right now, that is so much easier said than done. I feel anxious and over emotional immediately, and that's like not my baseline. That's like, I'm not a anxious, or I try not to overreact to things at least in the moment, but I feel that way like immediately when certain issues like this are brought up. But the media and extremists have made us fear communication and seeking to understand each other. And that is dangerous. And it's also just sad. So hearing someone's opinion or like a thought about one thing can create a whole narrative. You could hear someone say one standalone comment about something, and from that comment, you could assume so many things about them. I have done it. We are all guilty of it. You see somebody tweet one thing and you're like, oh my gosh, I immediately decided X, Y, and Z about you and blocked, canceled, whatever. Like, we've all done it. But we need to be more curious about why people feel the way that they do about things. We have to keep talking to each other. And that's what I want you to challenge your perception of, because it makes life more interesting, but more importantly, it keeps us all connected, finding common ground. And really all there is, all we really have is each other. And that's what makes up this world. And I hate that there are like topics. I'm a super open book. Like, I have, what you see is what you get. You can ask me anything and I'll be very straightforward with you. Like, I don't hesitate to share my opinion on things, like, generally. So the fact that there are topics of conversation that I find myself fearing of not wanting to bring up or not address with people, with anyone, not just people close to me, because again, like, I will talk to anyone about just about anything. So that feeling for me, I really don't like it. And I guess it makes me think that a lot of people are having that feeling, probably people who, if I'm generally very an open person, then other people have definitely got to be feeling that way too. And I know it's a lot easier said than done, because it's difficult to kind of table your initial reaction over these sorts of things. But I think recognizing that the media and the internet has kind of like blown a lot of these things out of proportion in terms of how they play on our emotions. And generally, even if you're not saying it, like actually opening the conversation about it, can you sit back for a second and just say, like, man, I wonder what makes that person feel that way about it. And even if I can't understand, I really want to understand. And I want to think about maybe how someone could have a different perception of really anything, any disagreement or conflict that is happening. If you can step back and just think about how or why someone could be seeing it different than you, I think there's a lot of validity and a lot of peace that can be found through challenging your perception and just acknowledging the fact that other people have a different perception. And that conversation might end with agreeing to disagree, but that's also something that we should be very much evolved enough as humans to be able to do. And we've got to find peace with that too. So there you go. Peace. I want to talk in our love segment. Let's move right along here about trying new things. And I think I've talked a little bit about this before, but yeah, try new things. Don't be afraid to do things that you're not great at. And I'm going to touch on just a little bit of how I think, certain things in this day and age are kind of stunting that. So while you're being curious about your family, friends, and neighbors and their perception of things, why not try something new? Maybe this is the new thing you're going to try. It counts. Or maybe encourage your kids or family members to try something new if you are someone that is good at this. Because this is my semi-annual reminder for myself and to the podcast faithful, because like I said, I do think that I've talked about this at least a little bit before, maybe from a slightly different angle. But I spent some time with my dear friend, Wesley McKinney of Validity, who always reminds me to get out of my comfort zone, because he is so great at exploring and trying new things and just having fun with things. My husband is also really good at this, at like just taking the ego out of things. And I fear that the internet has taken away this in many ways. First of all, not only do we spend more time on the internet, we're watching other people do things instead of doing them, but we see people doing all these things at the most elite level, and it's intimidating. Like, I think about myself growing up and going to see a community theater production. When I was 8 or 9 years old, I did not have access to see videos of performers on Broadway. So what I was seeing was people in my community perform and being wowed and awed and appreciating that in a way that, like, we do not appreciate these things about each other. Oh man, here I go, going on a tangent. But it's just making me think about how I went to like a concert, or there was a live band performing before fireworks on the 4th of July. And we saw this band and they were like really good, really good local musicians. They'd probably been playing together for a long time. And we were so into it, and like no one else cared. Same thing. They had an awesome singer sing the national anthem at this event who was like a high school kid, absolutely crushed it. Like we were genuinely amazed, just so much appreciation for it. And no one cared. And I'm like, it's because everyone is watching all of the best on TV and the internet constantly. And we're just like so underwhelmed by everything else. I don't know how to fix that again, but just think about it and make sure that you're like opening your eyes and your ears and really recognizing what's in front of you, because I think we lack that appreciation, but it's also just intimidating for us to then want to try and explore, and it makes us think we shouldn't even try. By human nature, like we want to be good at things. And by seeing this most elite or extreme version of something, we think like, well, there's no way that I could even be half that good. Guess what? Like most people can't. That's the point. One, we should have like another level of appreciation for that. And two, it doesn't matter. Like you don't have to be elite at everything that you do. And I'm preaching to myself here because I know that personally I have a hard time doing things that I am not good at. I did go to a theater audition recently, and for those of you that have listened multiple times before, you know that I like that's what I went to school for, is musical theater, and I have performed professionally, but it's been a little bit. This was my first one in Jersey. This was my first one on the East Coast in over a decade, and it's just not something that I do terribly often in the last few years. So I'm very proud of myself for going, but especially because I knew that there was going to be a good chance that I would have to do a dance audition. And that I know I am not even close to the best at. But guess what? I did it and I survived. Was I the best? Absolutely not. But I did my best and I felt great and I had fun. So what I am most proud of myself for is being able to like genuinely just have fun and enjoy the experience. And I want to continue to learn to have fun with things and not worry about skill level, because there's so many things that we're all missing out on because of our egos that just get in the way. It's like it's okay if you go to a workout class and you have no idea what you're doing and you have to start with light weights and you have to ask more questions, or you have to go slow on the bike or the treadmill or whatever. If you want to do it. Like don't miss out on something in fear, especially not in fear of like not being good. Quote, air quotes at it. Because comparison really is the thief of joy. And you can find something that you love doing in a completely non competitive nature and just enjoy it for what it is. So that's my challenge for you and for me, if you're out there. Let's get to our baseball segment to wrap things up today, because it is Women in Baseball Week. This week, July 21st is the beginning of the week, goes all the way through the end of the week of July 27th or 28th. But Women in Baseball Week is an annual worldwide event recognizing the value, diversity, and cultural significance of women in baseball. Women play a vital, I made up that word, maybe like a vital role also in all aspects of the sport, north, south, east, and west. So help us celebrate each one. There's tournaments, teams, libraries, museums, and individuals who will join the International Women's Baseball Center to recognize women's contributions to baseball around the globe. This I am reading to you is from the Women in Baseball Week website, which is going to be linked along with a number of other things that we're going to talk about here in the show notes. But this year's theme for Women in Baseball Week is hashtag read baseball. So it celebrates the books, writers, and libraries that record, preserve, and honor our history. On the website, they have a list of ways that you can participate in Women in Baseball Week. You can promote your team and playing opportunities. You can highlight your participation in baseball with a photo or story on social media. You are encouraged to encourage your local library or bookstore to participate as well with the books that we'll call out here. You can spotlight your organization's materials that document women in baseball. You can share your local history of women in baseball. I just moved from here, but where I used to live, there was a whole like softball museum that I I lived right next to for years and I knew absolutely nothing about. So maybe just do a light Google of like women in baseball or women in sports in whatever area you live in, and you just might be excited by what you find out. You can also grab a t-shirt, a Women in Baseball Week t-shirt, which I will link in the show notes. But here's some of the stuff that you'll find on the website if you check it out, and what my plans are for Women in Baseball Week that I would love to share with you and let you know how you can just be a little bit more tuned in and know what's going on and what the celebration is all about. So I am going to read the book Wait Till Next Year, which is a book by Doris Kearns Goodwin this week. And there's actually an online book club meeting that is hosted by Women in Baseball Week that you can sign up for. It takes place on July 24th in the evening. So I'll link that in the show notes. There's also another book by Lori Boris featured on the site that is called The Call. I ordered that. I'm going to have to physically read it. I'm going to listen to Wait Till Next Year because I do audiobooks, but I'm going to physically read The Call, which is about Lori's journey as a professional umpire. So I'm going to read that. I'll keep you updated on that too. So check it out. If you have other recommendations, let's hear them. Hit me up. And if you do check out either of these books, because I can't actually make it to the upcoming book club on July 24th this week, but maybe we could do our own little Peace, Love, and Baseball book club. I'm going to start with that Doris Kearns Goodwin book, Wait Till Next Year. She grew up in Brooklyn as a diehard Brooklyn Dodgers fan, and she's had quite the career. If you don't know who she is or anything about her, I mean, just Googling her and checking that out, I had no idea that she had like this strong, amazing tie and love for baseball. So that in itself is, I'm really looking forward to learning more about. There is also a Women in Baseball Week sale on the sport apparel and collectibles site. There's all kinds of amazing stuff on here. Again, I'm going to link it in the show notes because they have all kinds of really unique and it looks like high quality merch, from like makeup and skincare to really nice apparel. So check that out because they're throwing a big sale for this week. And I think one of the biggest highlights that I wish more people knew about and that I hope to share more about this week and really all year long is that the U.S. national team is playing in Canada at the Women's Baseball World Cup this month. The Women's Baseball World Cup is an international tournament in which national women's baseball teams from around the world compete. So it's basically like the WBC, the World Baseball Classic, but it's the WBWC for women's baseball teams, not softball, baseball. So the 2024 finals return to Canada and Thunder Bay for a third time. The games are going to take place July 28th through August 3rd. There is a site on that I'll link in the show notes as well for like where you can watch these games, stream them online. And yeah, the accessibility of baseball in general is a bit of an issue. We can, maybe end blackouts and things like that. And also get these women's games in part of your MLB TV package, because how cool would that be if it was just more accessible to watch and to get excited about. I got to go to a game last year that was an exhibition and a practice game for the U.S. women's team in Rockford, Illinois, which is where the Rockford Peaches used to play, if you've heard of the movie A League of Their Own. And I think I talked about that. It was around this time last year when we went and did that. But we actually did a very cool interview with the manager of the U.S. women's baseball team. Her name is Veronica Alvarez. She is also a coach in the Oakland A's system. So I'm going to link that for you in the show notes as well. She is just the coolest person and like an incredible coach, not just for baseball, but for life. So if you're looking for some more badass words of wisdom, you got him here today on Peace, Love, and Baseball. But Veronica has some really good ones for you. Hey, follow me on Twitter at KBirdTweets. You can find it here in the corner if you're watching on YouTube. And if you are watching on YouTube, on the KBirdTweets YouTube channel, like it. I'm like, where can you see me? Can you see my thumb? Like it, big thumbs up, subscribe, click it, and leave a comment. Leave a thought from our one-sided discussion today. I would love to hear from you on YouTube. You can follow us on Instagram at peace.love.baseball, and we have a Facebook page called Peace, Love, and Baseball. Until then, look out for another episode coming at you next week of Peace, Love, and Baseball.